Hey, welcome back. In the previous video, I showed you how to create user mailboxes. In this video, I want to follow up by talking about some of the other types of mailboxes that you can create in Exchange Server. So on this slide, I've got a few mailbox types listed, starting with a user mailbox. This is just a standard Exchange Server mailbox. This is the type of mailbox that we created in the previous video. The next type is a legacy mailbox. Now, a legacy mailbox is really nothing fancy. It's just an Exchange Server mailbox, usually a user mailbox, but not always, that was created by an older version of Exchange Server. That's all it is. The next thing that we've got is a shared mailbox. So a shared mailbox is a mailbox that's accessed by multiple users. So we've all seen situations where maybe you log onto a website and you need to request info and they'll have an email link and you click on the email link and it takes you to an address like info@something.com. Well, info is typically a group mailbox because it doesn't specify a particular person. So odds are the company that's receiving that mail has several different people that can log into that mailbox and get the messages. So typically shared mailboxes are used for things like the help desk mailbox or the HR mailbox, situations where there might be several people that periodically check a mailbox to see if somebody needs help. Then the last one on this slide is a linked mailbox. A linked mailbox is an Exchange Server mailbox for somebody who exists in a trusted external forest. And you actually saw a bit of a linked mailbox in a previous video. So let me switch over to my Exchange server and I'll show you what I mean. So here I am on my Exchange server, and you can see that there are a lot more mailboxes that exist now than existed in the last video. I created these mailboxes between videos, and we're going to be using some of these later on with some of the other videos. Now, as you'll recall, when we created a mailbox, what I did was I clicked on the Add button and I clicked User Mailbox. But take a look right here, we have an option for Linked Mailbox. And if I click on Linked Mailbox, then there's a dialog box that opens, and it says that a linked mailbox is associated with an external user account, which is what we just talked about. And I receive a message saying that no forest or domain trust can be found, which is understandable because there isn't one. But if I did have a trust with an external forest, then that would be listed right here, and I could create a linked mailbox for users within that external forest. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this and switch back over to my PowerPoint deck. So the next type of mailbox that I want to talk about are resource mailboxes. Now, resource mailboxes are some of the most commonly used mailbox types aside from user mailboxes. And Exchange has two different types of resource mailboxes that you can create. You can create a room mailbox or an equipment mailbox. So what are these? Well, basically, resource mailboxes are used to reserve a particular resource. For example, a room mailbox is usually associated with a conference room. So that way, if somebody wants to reserve the conference room for a particular time, they can use the calendar that's associated with the room's mailbox to make that reservation. Same thing with an equipment mailbox. If there's some type of piece of equipment that floats around from person to person within your company, then you can use an equipment mailbox to schedule the use of that piece of equipment. So let me switch back over to my Exchange server and I'll show you how to create resource mailboxes. Okay, so I've pulled up the Exchange Administrative Center and I've got the Recipients tab selected. And so far we've been dealing with the Mailboxes tab right here. But if you look a couple of tabs over, you'll notice that we have a tab marked Resources. I'll go ahead and select that. And if I click on New, we can create a room mailbox or an equipment mailbox. Now, the procedure that you're going to use works about the same way regardless of which type of mailbox you create. So for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to create a room mailbox. So I'll click Room Mailbox and a new browser window opens. And now we're prompted to enter a room name. I'm just going to call this one My Room. And next we have to enter an alias. For an alias, I'll call this My Room. And then we choose an organizational unit. I'll click Browse, and I'll place this in Users and click OK. And typically you're going to want to know the room's location. I'll put first floor. And if there's a phone in the room, you can enter a phone number. This might also be the phone number of the person who's responsible for managing the room. We have a capacity field that we can enter. Maybe this room has a capacity of 50 people. And there are some more options that you can use if you want. If I click more options, we can select the mailbox database. I'll go ahead and store this in DB1. And we can set an address book policy, which I'm not going to worry about. And I'll click Save. And the room mailbox has been created. You can even see the email address associated with that mailbox. So what about an equipment mailbox? Well, it works about the same way. I'll click New and Equipment Mailbox. Once again, a new browser window opens. We have to enter the name of the piece of equipment. Maybe this is a projector. and we have to enter an alias, and we can choose an organizational unit. Once again, I'll put this in users just because I don't have a better place to put it. And the same options are also available. If I click more options, we can choose the mailbox database that we want to put this in. I'll go ahead and use DB1, and I'm not going to worry about an address book policy. I'll click save, and the new equipment mailbox is created. And take a look at the mailbox type column right here. The mailbox type actually reflects room and equipment. Whereas if I go back to mailboxes, then the mailbox type field reflects user. So that's how you go about creating resource mailboxes. Let me pause the video for 1 second and switch back over to my PowerPoint deck. Now in an Exchange server deployment, there are also system mailboxes. System mailboxes are typically invisible, although there are ways to expose them. And these system mailboxes are things that are created automatically by Exchange server. There are two main types: arbitration mailboxes, and those handle moderated recipients, and distribution group member approvals. I haven't really talked about either of these yet, but those are things that we're going to be talking about later on. There are also discovery mailboxes, which get used in performing e-discovery. That's another topic related to compliance that I'm going to be talking about in another video. Now, these mailboxes are created automatically. You don't have to worry about creating them. You don't have to worry about managing them. The primary time that you have to interact with them is if you're performing a migration from one server to another, and you eventually want to delete a mailbox database. You're going to see an example of this in the lesson on migrating away from Exchange Server 2013 to Exchange 2016. In that lesson, we have to move mailboxes off of an Exchange 2013 server, including the system mailboxes. So in that video, I go through and I show how to figure out what system mailboxes exist on the server and how to move those. So if you're curious about system mailboxes, you might want to skip ahead and check out the lesson on migrating away from Exchange Server 2013. Now, there are a few other mailbox types, and I kind of hesitate to even use the word mailbox because some of these kind of fall into a gray area, but I do want to discuss them. The first one on the list is a disconnected mailbox. Now, this truly is a mailbox. The basic idea is that maybe somebody leaves your company, so you disable or delete their user account, but you leave the mailbox behind because you want whoever replaces that person to have access to the previous user's mail. That's a disconnected mailbox. It's a mailbox that exists within the Exchange server database, but that isn't connected to a user account. The next one on the list is a mail contact. Now, a mail contact really isn't a mailbox at all. It's actually just a mail-enabled Active Directory object that can be used to route mail to an external email address. So maybe you've got people that get emailed very frequently by a lot of people in your organization, maybe a vendor, maybe somebody who provides support for you, something like that. You might create a mail contact to make contacting that person easier. The next thing that we have is a mail user. Now, this is a user who has an Active Directory account, but they don't use an Exchange mailbox. Instead, they use some other type of external email address. So basically, you're associating an external email address with a local Active Directory user. And then finally, we have public folder mailboxes. In Exchange Server 2013 and Exchange 2016, public folders exist within a public folder mailbox. So the sole purpose of that public folder mailbox is to store public folders. So these are most of the types of mailboxes that exist in Exchange Server 2016. And you'll be seeing a few examples of these along the way as we progress through some of the videos that are still to come.